Maria was born in 1989 and she grew up in Puerto Rico. Her early life was a happy childhood, beautiful as a little girl, enjoyed her high school years. Lots of freckles as she got older.
Maria's parents divorced when she was a little bit younger, and it was definitely difficult for her.
She was sort of devastated, and that was kind of her goal, is to marry the love of her life and never have to divorce ever.
Maria was going to nursing school in Puerto Rico when she met Joel.
She fell in love, of course, and kind of got swept off her feet. She saw a life and a future with Joel.
She was enamored because he gave her so much attention. Her sister and her father had some cautions because of his age. He was 10 years older than her, but Maria saw someone who had set goals and dreams, and he sold those dreams to her.
Maria and Joel were married back in 2010. It was a beautiful occasion. Maria looked beautiful.
Maria and Joel had goals to come to the mainland.
Joel was training to become a CRNA, which is a certified registered nurse anesthetist.
You're not trained as a doctor, it's not as much schooling, but the pay is very high. Maria and Joel were excited to welcome their first son into the world. He was a beautiful little boy.
That was something that Maria was over the moon about. Her calling was to be a mother.
Joel had a very good paying job, and that enabled Maria to be able to stay at home, which she enjoyed, devoting her time to her firstborn son. Maria and I first met at a ladies' night. There was a woman on our church that hosted a ladies' bowling night. So we met at one of those arcades. She looked at me and she said, "So you're the pastor's wife?" And I said, "Well, yes, I am." And she said, "So tell me about God." We became friends right away, and we just never looked back.
I'm like freaking out here.
When I first met Maria, I thought she was incredibly bubbly. She was very happy, very animated, incredibly warm and friendly. You could tell she was wholly in love with her husband, loved her little family. She was devoted. She loved being a wife.
Maria and Joel seemed to be in a loving marriage. You could have fun with them. Joel appeared to be a supportive and proud dad and engaged dad. 2017, Maria had gotten pregnant, and very shortly after, she had had a miscarriage. And this was really difficult for Maria.
Joel didn't really understand what happened and thought somehow that the miscarriage was her fault. And that didn't help her state of mind. Maria was so excited to be pregnant again, just a short time after her miscarriage. You could just see a glow about her while she was pregnant.
Maria had her second son in 2018, and, she was ecstatic.
Joel seemed excited, but this is a time where she started to feel some distance. He started to be more secretive, and that sort of made her nervous that maybe she was doing something wrong.
At this point in Maria's life, what she wanted was to feel the completion of her family, but Joel was nowhere to be seen. Joel had a 5-year goal that he obsessively spoke about, and so he devoted himself to work, took overtime whenever he could.
Maria talked about a lot of the changes going on in Joel's life. She kept saying that he's so different now that they moved to Laredo. He started bulking up so fast that it seemed abnormal to me. Both of us suspected there was some supplements going on, probably a lot of testosterone.
At this point, Joel's priorities appeared incredibly vain to me and short-sighted. His goals were money and his figure, his body.
In January of 2019, Joel asked for a break from their marriage. He just was not happy with the way things were going. And so he decided he was just gonna move out and stay with a friend. And that was a really hard time for her. But she would often tell me that she had 10 good years of marriage and she didn't want to throw it away, all because of this 1 year where he's just acting insane.
Her goal was always for her family to stay together no matter what, because the divorce between her parents had been so devastating.
I want to support him, be his rock, because I know he needs it.
Maria liked to keep a journal. When Joel started being more distant, it really helped her to get her thoughts on paper.
How can I support someone who's always making me small? A piece of nothing, not enough.
At the point that Maria and Joel were separated, he would come home to spend a little bit of time not just with her, but with the boys.
He would expect her to still wash his clothes, and he would convince her that they needed to have sex to continue to protect the marriage. I told her that it's not your job to do his laundry, and it's definitely not your job to be intimate with him while he's breaking up the marriage. In March of 2019, Maria was doing his laundry. She found a plane ticket. She never even knew he went to Spain. She just knew in her heart that something was terribly wrong and he had not been honest at all during this whole time. Maria finally worked up the courage to confront Joel about this plane ticket.
Joel admitted to having an affair. She was a nurse at one of the hospitals that he was working at.
Her name was Janet Arredondo, and he had taken her on a trip to Spain. Maria was devastated, but at the same time, I think she expected this answer.
At this point, Joel broke down. He told Maria that he wanted to keep his family, he wanted to be with her, he would break up with the girlfriend. True to Maria, she gave Joel another chance. She would do anything to get her family back.
It seemed like such a back and forth during that time that Joel would tell her one weekend that he stopped the affair, and then a couple days later he would change his tune and walk back out. He wanted both women, and so the only way to get that was to string both of them along. And that was really just almost too much for her to bear.
My experience with Joel was that he was emotionally abusive. Joel was confident, what I perceived as narcissistic, and he was kind of domineering. He was like a dominant authority in the household.
One day, I was with Maria at the coffee shop, and Joel agreed to meet her there. When we were in line, there was a guy that sort of hit on her. Joel was extremely agitated, angry, and vividly upset that someone had hit on his wife. When he started to get angry with her, I told him that he had no right to tell her that she was wearing the wrong thing or that she invited the attention when he was having an affair with another woman. I am a bolder personality than Maria was, and he started to get nervous of the influence that me and her other friends had on her, that she might become bold one day. He started to discourage her from seeing me.
Maria loved Jesus so much, and she didn't want to break up her family for fear of God. What I told her was that biblically, he had gotten to the point where she had every right to leave the marriage.
Don't put that on me.
What are you talking about?
There was a argument that they had in the car at one point, and Maria recorded it unbeknownst to Joel.
Because it feels like you're like, okay, look, if I stay in the house, I'm gonna be frustrated. Frustration led me to be unfaithful to you in the past.
Maybe.
No, it led me.
Maybe.
You said it
Because I think
okay.
that
So
possibly.
Okay.
Maria was talking to Joel about his unfaithfulness.
What do you have to say?
Nothing.
So what do you want me to do with that?
With what?
With nothing.
I don't know. It's up to you.
No, Papa. You walk out that door, we're getting a divorce.
All right, fine. Got it.
I have to realize that Joel that I knew and fell in love with isn't the Joel I am dealing with. I love him. I don't need to accept none of this.
In the summer of 2020, Maria was beginning to see that there might not be a future with Joel.
Maria finally realized that Joel was not getting better. He wasn't getting rid of his affair, and he wasn't going to stop the lying and the dishonesty. And I think she finally started to picture a life without him. She wanted to be independent. Maria had the goal of becoming a nurse in Texas. She needed to pass her nursing exam to get her degree.
She was making plans to be able to provide for the children on her own.
Take 1,000.
She had hobbies and things she enjoyed doing.
I have been wanting to do a YouTube channel for quite a while.
She was doing hair and makeup tutorials.
I would probably grab like a little bit by little. Maybe that could help you, Gabby.
She was so beautiful in the way that she would play around with her makeup.
Whew, I like it. Just makes you look more awake. There's nothing like a good mascara and a good bronzer to make you feel good, right?
In September of 2020, Maria found Joel's phone and was able to access a bunch of messages between him and Janet. Really just showed her that he was in a full-blown affair and they were having sex.
That was the moment that she saw it with her own eyes, and that her very, very determined spirit came out.
Maria confronted Joel, and I think Joel started to see a different Maria. She was saying, hey, I'm done, and I'm not gonna listen to your lies anymore. So he told her, I'm gonna stop seeing Janet for real this time. We're gonna move to Dallas, and that will prove to you that I'm willing to put her away. Maria was skeptical, but at the same time, he had never offered to move away from his girlfriend before. Part of her wanted to believe that it could be true. Maria was very excited to tell me about how their marriage was going to turn around, and so we agreed to meet. However, before she came to my house, she gave me a phone call and said that she was going to be late. And she said, I called Joel and I heard a dog barking in the background, and I think it was Janet's. I think he lied to me again. I'm going to stop by the house and just make sure. I told her that I didn't think it was wise for her to stop over there, that nothing good was going to come from it, but she said she just couldn't help herself. She had to. When Maria arrived at Janet's house, she saw that his car was there. She got out of the car and decided to confront them both. When Maria arrived at Janet's house and saw that Joel's car was there, she was very angry. She had just been played again. Janet used the Ring app to kind of talk to her and say that she needed to leave right away or she would call the police.
Maria was incredibly upset and wasn't going to go anywhere until she had spoken to her husband. When Joel finally emerges, he tells Maria that he's chosen Janet, and I can't even imagine what was going through her head when hours earlier he had been telling a different story.
Joel told Maria to go get in the car and that they would drive to the park and they would just hash it out. When Maria and Joel were at the park, he got so angry that he smashed her windshield with his fist, and it just shattered. Meanwhile, Janet called the police. The police responded fairly quickly.
Hello, ma'am, did you call police?
Yes, I did.
What's going on? You're gonna get up. What happened?
I had a woman come by that she was told not to be here, so I had already filed a...
Trespass warning? Okay.
She was here, she was asked to leave, she refused, so I called you guys.
Let me make a phone call in, and hopefully she'll answer. If not, well, that's the only way I can go in here.
Hey, I'm talking to you right now. Hang up the phone.
I guess that's your boyfriend.
Yeah.
They called Maria, and Joel, you can hear him screaming. He couldn't believe she answered the phone while they were talking.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system.
I'm gonna try one more time.
Janet started texting Joel to be quiet, to let him know it was the police calling.
Hello.
Hello, yes, sir. I'm looking for Maria Munoz.
Yeah, she's here. I'm having a conversation with her.
All right, this is Officer Jalomo, Laredo PD, sir.
Yeah,
I'm calling on behalf of Janetta Redondo. Can I speak to her?
sure.
Thank you.
After receiving the text from Janet, Joel knew it was going to be the police, and instantly he was a calm, collected person.
Hello.
Yes, Miss Munoz.
Mm-hmm.
Man, this is Officer Jalomo, Laredo PD.
Yes.
Okay, I understand you came over to Ms. Arredondo's house earlier today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you to not return. If not, you will be placed into custody.
Okay.
After the police hung up with her, Maria drove over to my house. She was very upset. She was almost hysterical. She told me that she was finally ready to move on, for real this time. No more getting lied to. I saw her the next day at church. And even though she was sad, she was determined that this was the thing that she had to do. Later that day, she sent him a text and let him know she was not going to go after him anymore. She let him know that for them to be legally separated, an attorney needed to be involved in that.
Joel's response was that he didn't want any lawyers involved. His concern lied in finances. He really didn't want Maria to go through with it because that would cost him.
He had responded initially on Sunday, but then on Monday, he had a different response, and he sent it through email. Again, he gave implication that there was hope for their marriage. I didn't believe any of it. And yet somehow I could not convince her to say no to this meeting. They agreed to meet around 7, and I told her to contact me as soon as he arrived, as soon as he left. She agreed to do that. I believe it was 9:30 when I had not heard from her. He showed up already much, much later than he was supposed to. He should have been gone by then. I started to pray that the conversation would go well.
Alert 911 with the address of emergency.
So I called my wife on responses, and kind of scared if she's not breathing.
Alert 911 with the address of emergency.
So I called my wife on responses, and kind of scared if she's not breathing. She may have taken some pills.
Okay, sir. And do you know what kind of pills they were?
Yeah, Glenn has a pen.
On September 22nd, 2020, the Laredo Police Department received a 911 call for unresponsive female. I was the first officer on scene. So as I approached the house, I see a male subject at the doorway.
What's going on?
He just turns around and bolts right into the residence.
What's going on?
So I followed quickly behind him.
What's going on?
Unresponsive on the bed. But it can't do a call.
His name was Joel Peot. Female is his wife, Maria Munoz.
What'd she take?
I think Glenn has a pen. But she's been pretty depressed lately.
I hear the paramedics, the ambulance get to the scene. They had their lights and sirens. Paramedics continued CPR, and I see no changes in her body. She's not getting any better.
Yeah, under control.
No, man, she's not. No, she's been down for a while.
Yeah. The paramedics on scene determined that Maria was deceased at 1:50 a.m.
This is 20. Confirmed 82.
What's going on? What happened?
I started getting very suspicious about Joel. His pupils are just really big. I see that he's sweating profusely.
Let's have a seat over here.
She's been super depressed. I've been ignoring her. we're going through some problems. And I came to talk to her, like we were just talking.
So you're not staying here right now?
I'm like, this doesn't make sense. If he doesn't live here, what is he doing here at 1 o'clock in the morning?
We had sex, we took a shower, and I thought she was like knocked out. I didn't think anything of it, so just kept on doing my thing. And then I go back upstairs, and then she just...
He starts crying, but it's a really fake cry. It didn't add up to me. I didn't like where it was going.
Oh, it's 37. Yeah, it's really 37.
I told him like, this is very 37, which is means suspicious in police jargon.
We gotta talk to you, okay? Come on, just you gotta go outside.
So I arrived at the scene shortly after 2 a.m. Once I got the authorization and consent to go into the home, I did do a brief walkthrough. I see Maria, her body is there. Joelle insinuated that she had overdosed on a bottle of pills, a bottle of clonazepam. Whenever somebody takes a bottle of pills, they foam from the mouth. I noticed that Maria was not foaming from the mouth. When they did the examination of Maria's body, my partners discovered a track mark, or like a puncture, on her arm. It looked like she had just gone to get her blood drawn. And then they also discovered a bag of medical supplies. Inside that bag were needles, catheters, and 4 to 5 bottles of medications. I immediately suspected that there was more to this than what Joelle was saying. We transported Joelle to the police department. It was a voluntary interview. When I arrived at the station, I could hear him screaming. So much so that I had to tell the officer to tell him to calm down. When I entered the room, my interview at that point was that of a grieving spouse.
What's going on, man? She's been really depressed because so like we got separated.
Joelle wanted to make it clear that Maria was depressed and was not taking the separation well.
So you said that Maria was taking pills for depression. Were they prescribed to her? Yeah, they were. And hers ran out, so mine were recently given to me. So I just went to give her some. You know the name of the drug? Yeah, 1 milligram clonazepam.
According to Joelle, he had a prescription bottle for the same type of medication. So he allowed Maria to take some of his pills.
When I checked my pills, 2 pills, she took a bottle.
He wanted me to think that Maria was so depressed that she had taken a bottle of clonazepam and that she committed suicide.
I saw a track mark on her. Okay. Did she inject herself with anything that you know of? Would she inject herself with anything? And if she did, what would it be? You know? Did you inject her tonight? No. With anything? No.
By the end of that interview, I didn't suspect that Maria had taken any pills. When we looked at the needle puncture wound, the medical equipment at home, I suspected that Joelle, with his knowledge of anesthesia, had killed his wife. So at the end of that interview, Joelle was released. There was no evidence to charge him.
The next morning, my husband came to get me. He told me that the police had let him know that Maria was deceased. And I remember just screaming out, "Oh my God, he's killed her."
It really was like a ton of bricks. I immediately said he did it. Like, he did it. He actually did it.
When the police told me they were doing a suicide investigation, I told them that was impossible.
I knew that she would never do such a thing because she had plans for the future. She had plans for her life.
The key piece of evidence that was pending for us to rule out suicide, to rule out overdose, was a toxicology report.
As soon as we received that, we knew what caused her death.
The toxicology report routinely takes a few months. And in January 2021, we received the report.
The first thing we looked was to see how much clonazepam she had. And it was striking that she didn't have any clonazepam in her system.
1 milligram of clonazepam.
He said clonazepam, and she had none in her system. So then we reviewed the other drugs that were in her system. It was Versed, ketamine, and morphine. Propofol, Narcan, lidocaine, and Demerol.
So all these drugs, what they have in common is that they're normally used for anesthesia. I was familiar with propofol because that's known as what ultimately killed Michael Jackson.
Propofol takes effect immediately. The second it hits your bloodstream, you fall asleep. So it's impossible for you to self-administer propofol. Someone else has to administer propofol. So we knew it was not an overdose. We believed that we had the proof to show murder.
Laredo police, or we're gonna break down the door. Mr. Phillips, go ahead and grab me here back.
Joel Peyote was arrested and charged with the murder officially on January 16th, 2021.
Joel Peyote's trial started March 20th of 2023. The defense argued that Maria was a drug abuser who committed suicide because she was so depressed, and that Joel gave Maria an injection in an attempt to revive her. Maria's journals were critical to the case, so we could refute that she was suicidal.
Today my head will not look down. Today I will conquer. Today I am free. I am strong. I am confident. I am enough.
When I testified in court, I was able to read the journals to the jury and mention to the jury that suicide and depression had no bearing on this case whatsoever.
With all the accusations flying about suicide or trying to smear her, Maria was able to speak for herself on how she felt, what she thought, and share the hope that she had.
I love my life. I love who I am becoming.
Joel couldn't steal her voice from her like he thought he had. And it was beautiful.
It was important to give as much background information as we could to explain Joel and Maria's relationship. The prosecution team brought in a video that Maria had recorded without Joel knowing.
You walk out that door, we're getting a divorce.
All right, fine. Got it.
We believed it was important to show that he's pretty cold about the pain that she's experiencing. We explained to the jury that on September 21st, 2020, Joel Peyote arrived to Maria's home with a bag of anesthetic drugs and IV equipment. He was wearing his scrubs because he had been at the hospital. So the evidence showed that she had high levels of caffeine in her system. We were able to describe to the jury that he probably showed up with a cup of coffee, and in that coffee, he likely included the oral anesthetic drugs, which is the ketamine, the Versed, and the morphine. And that would have incapacitated her. She would not have been able to resist him trying to put an IV on her to give her the additional drugs, lidocaine, propofol, Narcan, and Demerol. The levels of anesthetic drugs in her system were enough for 2 major surgeries. Joel knew that this was going to end her life.
And we are here for Maria Munoz, who wrote, "No matter what happens, I will be fine. I will not put my head down.
I will hold it high. I am unique. No one is me, and that is my superpower. I am enough, and all I need. I will always push and thrive. I will shine bright like a diamond in the sky. The woman who never gave up. Maria."
Joel Peyote was found guilty of murder and of tampering with the evidence.
When Joel finally was convicted of murder, I was so relieved. I was grateful for Maria to get justice, but I was sad for her children.
I don't think that Joel has any real remorse for what he did. I think that he's a narcissist and a manipulator.
Being with Maria and Laredo was like having family there. She became like a sister to me. She always lifted my spirits, even when she was the one with tragedy in her life.
I think Joel sold her a life of dreams and promised her the world. Maria was special, and she deserved so much more.
Okay. I'm not too sure, but oh, there you go. Mayra. Ha! Hi! So I'm gonna do my hair for you guys to see.
At 6:42 a.m., the phone rang inside a modest brick house in Sydney's western suburbs, and by 7:15, a mother was screaming a name that would soon echo across the city like a headline carved in stone. Missing. Vanished. No sign of forced entry. No ransom call. No body. Just an empty bed, a half-zipped backpack on the floor, and a bedroom window cracked open to the cool March air of 2004. Her name was Erin Walsh. 19 years old. University freshman. Part-time barista. No history of running away. No drugs. No secret boyfriend that anyone knew of. The kind of girl neighbors described with words that feel safe, polite, bright, reliable. The kind of girl who texts if she's going to be 10 minutes late. The kind of girl who doesn't disappear. But by mid-morning, she was gone. The last confirmed sighting came from a late-night bus driver who remembered her because she thanked him twice before stepping off near Parramatta Road. It was 10:17 p.m. She wore jeans, a grey hoodie, white sneakers. She had earbuds in. The CCTV footage from the bus showed her staring blankly out the window as streetlights streaked across the glass. Nothing unusual. Nothing dramatic. Just a girl going home. Except she never made it inside. Her house sat on a quiet street lined with jacaranda trees. No signs of struggle in the yard. No footprints in the flower beds. The gate wasn't broken. The front door was locked from the inside when her mother woke up. Erin's bedroom, however, told a quieter, stranger story. The window wasn't shattered. It wasn't forced. It was simply open, pushed upward just enough for a slim body to slip through. Police measured the gap. 35 centimeters at its widest point. Detectives asked the question that would haunt the case for years. Did she leave voluntarily? Or did someone coax her out into the night? By the afternoon, patrol cars idled outside the Walsh residence. Crime scene tape fluttered in the breeze. Reporters gathered, microphones raised, hungry for answers that didn't exist. Sydney teen missing under mysterious circumstances, the first headlines read. Within hours, her photo was everywhere. Local television, newspapers, community bulletin boards, early internet forums still clunky and slow. The community felt it immediately. This wasn't an inner-city crime, soaked in sirens and chaos. This was suburban. Quiet. Safe. Or at least it had been. Her phone was found charging on her desk. Wallet still in her bag. Passport untouched. Laptop open to a half-written essay about post-war migration patterns. Nothing packed. Nothing planned. If she had chosen to leave, she'd done it with nothing. Her mother insisted she heard no noise that night. No creaking floorboards. No engine outside. No whispered argument. Just silence. Heavy, ordinary silence. The first theory spread fast. Secret romance. Detectives pulled her call records. Dozens of routine numbers. Classmates. Her workplace. Family. One number stood out. A prepaid mobile registered under no name, contacted 3 times in the week before she vanished. Short calls. Less than a minute each. The last one placed at 9:58 p.m., just before she got off the bus. Police traced the tower ping. It narrowed the signal to a 3-kilometer radius. Dense. Urban. Thousands of people. They released nothing publicly about the mystery number, but rumors leaked anyway. Talkback radio speculated about online predators. University friends whispered about a secret boyfriend she never mentioned. Detectives knocked on doors. They searched nearby parks. Drains. Abandoned lots. Nothing. Then came the witness. A woman walking her dog claimed she saw a white sedan idling near the corner at around 10:30 p.m. The engine was running. Headlights off. She assumed someone was picking up a friend. She couldn't describe the driver. She couldn't even confirm if Erin entered the vehicle. But the timeline fit too neatly to ignore. White sedan. Common. Unremarkable. Almost invisible in its normalcy. Police canvassed traffic cameras. In 2004, surveillance technology wasn't what it is now. Grainy footage. Limited angles. Hard drives that overwrote themselves after days. They found several white sedans in the area that night. Too many. None clearly linked. Days stretched into weeks. Search parties combed through bushland on the city's fringe. Volunteers in bright vests moved in lines across dry grass, calling her name into open air. Helicopters circled. Dive teams checked nearby waterways. Each effort ending the same way, empty hands. Erin's disappearance started to feel wrong in a way that defied logic. There was no ransom demand. No bank activity. No confirmed sighting after she stepped off that bus. If it was an abduction, it was clean. Clinical. Planned. Detectives examined the bedroom window more closely. No fingerprints except Erin's and her mother's. No fibers caught on the sill. No scrape marks indicating someone climbed in. Which led to a chilling possibility: she opened it herself. But why? Friends described her as cautious. She'd recently turned down a party invitation because she had an early shift. She walked home from the bus stop countless times without incident. Nothing in her behavior suggested recklessness. Then a classmate came forward with a detail so small it almost slipped through the cracks. 2 days before she vanished, Erin had seemed distracted during a lecture. When asked if she was okay, she allegedly said, "I think someone's been watching the house." She laughed after saying it. Brushed it off. Claimed it was probably nothing. Probably nothing. Police returned to the neighborhood with renewed urgency. They asked residents about unfamiliar vehicles, strange faces, late-night activity. Most reported nothing unusual. One elderly man remembered a car parked across from the Walsh house several evenings that week. He thought it belonged to a visitor down the street. He never wrote down the plate. By April, the case officially became what investigators dread: a cold case in the making. Leads thinned. Media attention shifted. New scandals replaced old tragedies. But the Walsh family refused silence. They organized vigils. Candlelight gatherings where Erin's photo glowed against the dark. "Bring Erin home," posters pleaded. Months turned into a year. The prepaid phone number went dark permanently. No further activity. Telecommunications records hit a dead end. The SIM card had been purchased with cash at a convenience store in Blacktown. No CCTV footage remained from that week. The store's tapes were overwritten long before police realized their significance. It felt orchestrated. Methodical. Detective Sergeant Michael Harris, lead investigator, reportedly told colleagues, "Whoever did this knew exactly how to leave nothing behind." He'd worked homicides for 15 years. This case unsettled him in ways others hadn't. Because murder scenes usually scream. They bleed evidence. They resist silence. This one whispered. There were no signs of violence in Erin's room. Bed sheets slightly rumpled, as if she'd risen gently. Her phone untouched. If she'd received a message, it wasn't on record. If someone signaled her from outside, no one saw. Speculation grew darker. Human trafficking rings. Stalker fantasies turned lethal. A neighbor with a hidden obsession. Each theory built on thin air. In 2006, investigators reopened the file after a similar disappearance occurred 2 suburbs away. Another young woman. Another late-night walk home. Another white sedan rumored near the scene. But that woman's body was discovered weeks later in bushland near the M4 motorway. Cause of death: blunt force trauma. No link to Erin could be proven. DNA didn't match any known offenders. The cases remained officially separate, unofficially intertwined in public imagination. Erin's parents aged visibly in interviews. Her mother kept her bedroom unchanged. Clothes folded. Books on the shelf. Dust gathering slowly over memories frozen in place. Her father rarely spoke publicly, but when he did, his voice carried a controlled fury. "Someone knows something," he repeated. "Someone out there is living their life like nothing happened." The years layered over the mystery like sediment. Technology advanced. Social media exploded. True crime communities dissected the case anew. Amateur sleuths mapped bus routes, analyzed old photographs, debated the angle of the bedroom window. Every few months, a new breakthrough rumor surfaced online, only to collapse under scrutiny. Then, in late 2009, a development jolted the investigation. A former telecom employee contacted police claiming that internal logs from 2004 had been archived off-site longer than standard retention policies. Against expectations, partial metadata from the mystery prepaid number was recovered. It revealed one additional outgoing call placed minutes after Erin stepped off the bus, a 12-second connection to another prepaid phone. That second phone had activated only once. That night. That hour. And then it vanished from the network forever. 2 burner phones. Coordinated. Disposable. The call pinged off a tower closer to Erin's street than previously believed. Suggesting the second phone, perhaps the one in the white sedan, was waiting nearby before she even arrived home. It shifted the narrative. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. Police quietly assembled a list of individuals who purchased prepaid phones in the surrounding suburbs that week using bulk cash transactions. Hundreds of names. Many false. Dead ends multiplied. And still, no body. Without remains, without a confession, without physical evidence tying any suspect to the scene, prosecutors had nothing to hold in court. Erin's legal status remained missing, not deceased. A technicality that felt cruel. By 2012, 8 years had passed. Sydney had changed. New buildings rose. Old shops closed. The jacaranda trees outside the Walsh home grew taller. But the absence remained raw. Every anniversary brought renewed media interest. Each segment recycled the same footage, the bus CCTV, the bedroom window, the grieving family. Viewers watched with a familiar mix of horror and detachment. Another unsolved disappearance in a city that prides itself on safety. But beneath the surface, detectives never fully let it go. They re-examined the bus footage with improved enhancement software. They tracked down former neighbors who had moved interstate. They reviewed sex offender registries. One name began to surface repeatedly in internal discussions. A man who lived less than a kilometer away in 2004, with prior charges of stalking that never resulted in conviction. His name was Daniel Hargreaves. At the time of Erin's disappearance, he was 28. Employed intermittently as a mechanic. Owner of, according to old registration records, a white 1998 Toyota Camry. The file on Hargreaves was thin but unsettling. Complaints from 2 women about being followed. Anonymous hang-up calls. Nothing strong enough to prosecute. By 2005, he had moved to Queensland. Police interviewed him in 2013. He denied knowing Erin. Claimed he sold the Camry months before she vanished. Records were incomplete. The buyer untraceable. No forensic evidence linked him to the Walsh residence. His DNA did not match anything from the second suburban case in 2006. Again, nothing. And yet, Detective Harris reportedly left that interview convinced of something he couldn't articulate. He was too calm, he told a colleague. Too rehearsed. Still, calm isn't a crime. As the decade mark passed, the case hardened into legend. University students, who hadn't even been teenagers, in 2004 whispered about it during late-night study sessions. Parents cited it as a warning. Don't walk alone. Don't trust strangers. Don't assume safe neighborhoods guarantee safety. The Walsh family held onto hope publicly, even as private despair crept in. Psychics offered visions. Anonymous tips flooded in, most cruel, some deranged. Each one investigated. Each one dissolving. And through it all, one image refused to fade. A grey hoodie disappearing into the glow of a streetlight. A bus pulling away. A window left open to the night. No scream. No shattered glass. Just absence. A disappearance so clean it felt impossible. A city searching its own shadow. A question suspended in air for years. Did Erin Walsh step willingly into that darkness? Or was she guided there by someone who had been watching, waiting, calculating every silent move? In Sydney, 2004 never truly ended. It lingered in that quiet suburban street, in the hum of passing traffic along Parramatta Road, in the space between a bus stop and a bedroom window. And somewhere, perhaps, in the memory of a white sedan idling with its headlights off, engine running, patient in the dark. By the winter of 2014, the file labeled Walsh, errand missing person had swollen into 12 archive boxes, and a hard drive thick with digitized fragments of a life interrupted. 10 years. A decade of paper trails, dead ends, whispered theories. And yet one detail refused to sit quietly, the timing. The precision. The sense that whoever had taken her knew her routine down to the minute. Detective Sergeant Michael Harris no longer led the case officially. Promotions, transfers, the slow churn of bureaucracy had moved him sideways. But he still requested updates. Still visited the Walsh house every March. Still stared at the same bedroom window as if it might finally confess. In 2014, a newly formed cold case unit in New South Wales decided to re-examine the disappearance with fresh eyes. Not nostalgia. Not sentiment. Just data. They rebuilt the timeline from scratch, minute by minute, beginning not at 10:17 p.m. when Erin stepped off the bus, but weeks earlier. Phone logs. Bank transactions. University swipe card entries. They charted her movements like coordinates on a map. Patterns emerged. Erin took the same bus home every Tuesday and Thursday after her late shift at the cafe. Same seat near the middle. Same stop. Same 8-minute walk from Parramatta Road to her front gate. Predictable. Then came a detail previously overlooked. A security camera outside a petrol station, 2 blocks from her bus stop, had captured a white 1998 Toyota Camry passing by at 10:05 p.m. on March 18, 2004. The timestamp matched the route toward Erin's neighborhood. The footage was grainy, barely more than headlights and a pale silhouette, but enhanced imaging now made the number plate partially legible. 3 letters. 2 numbers. The rest obscured. Cross-referenced with old registration records. Only 6 white Camrys in Greater Sydney at the time matched that partial sequence. 5 were accounted for, owners interviewed years earlier and cleared. The 6th had belonged to Daniel Hargreaves. The same name. The same white sedan. The same man who had seemed too calm. But there was a complication. Official records showed Hargreaves sold the Camry in January 2004. 2 months before Erin vanished. The buyer's details were incomplete. A handwritten transfer form, smudged ink, no contact phone number. It looked legitimate. It looked ordinary. Cold case investigators dug deeper. They located the mechanic workshop where Hargreaves had worked in 2004. It had closed years earlier, but one former co-worker remembered something unsettling. Hargreaves had once joked about girls who think they're safe in suburbia. At the time, it sounded like crude humor. In hindsight, it felt heavier. Another former neighbor from his old street came forward after seeing a renewed media segment in 2015. She claimed that in the weeks before Erin disappeared, she had noticed Hargreaves parking near Parramatta Road late at night, engine idling, windows slightly down. When she asked why, he told her he liked the quiet. She hadn't thought much of it then. Police re-interviewed Hargreaves in Queensland in early 2016. This time, they came armed with enhanced footage and witness statements. He maintained his composure. Claimed faulty memory. Said he couldn't recall where he was on March 18, 2004. That's 12 years ago, he shrugged. His alibi from that period had always been vague, working odd shifts, visiting friends who no longer lived in the area. Investigators requested access to his financial history from 2004. Buried in archived bank microfiche was a cash withdrawal of $2,000 on March 17, the day before Erin vanished. Not a crime. Not illegal. But unusual for him. His income at the time was unstable. $2,000 was significant. The theory shifted from spontaneous abduction to orchestrated setup. Burner phones. Surveillance. Cash. A vehicle positioned minutes before she arrived home. But motive remained a ghost. Then came the forensic re-examination. In 2004, Erin's bedroom window had yielded nothing but her own fingerprints. But the technology back then was primitive compared to 2017 standards. The cold case unit retrieved the preserved window frame from storage, carefully sealed, rarely touched. They sent it to a specialized lab capable of extracting touched DNA from surfaces once considered clean. Weeks passed. Then the call came. A partial male DNA profile had been recovered from the lower outer edge of the window frame. Not enough for an immediate match. Not a full profile. But enough to enter into the national database. No direct hit. Still, it was something tangible, proof that someone else had touched that window. Police discreetly obtained a fresh DNA sample from Hargreaves, under the pretext of eliminating him definitively. He complied, confident. The lab comparison came back inconclusive. The partial sample from the window was too degraded to confirm or exclude him with certainty. Frustration mounted. Media outlets caught wind of renewed activity in the case. Headlines flared again. Cold case reopened. New DNA evidence. Erin's face returned to television screens, older now in digitally aged renderings. Social media exploded with speculation. Some accused Hargreaves openly. Others warned against trial by internet. Under pressure, investigators expanded their focus beyond one suspect. They reanalyzed the burner phone metadata. This time, they examined purchase patterns across multiple stores selling prepaid SIM cards in March 2004. One convenience store clerk, now retired, remembered something odd. A man buying two identical prepaid phones, insisting on paying in exact change. The description was vague. Medium build. Dark hair. Baseball cap. It could have been anyone. But sales records indicated those phones were activated within minutes of each other. One pinged near Parramatta Road. The other near a warehouse district less than 5 kilometers away. Warehouse district. Police canvassed abandoned industrial properties in that area back in 2004. Nothing was found. But 15 years had passed. Buildings demolished. Lots redeveloped into apartment complexes. If Erin had been taken there, evidence might have been buried under concrete long ago. In 2018, an anonymous letter arrived at the cold case unit. No return address. Typed, not handwritten. It contained only one sentence. Check the old storage units on Barlow Street. Barlow Street, had housed a cluster of self-storage garages in 2004. Most were cleared and rebuilt in 2010. But archival rental records still existed. Investigators pulled them. On March 10, 2004, 8 days before Erin disappeared, a storage unit on Barlow Street had been rented under the name D. Harper. Paid in cash for 1 month. The listed contact number. A prepaid mobile. The same series as the second burner phone that pinged after Erin stepped off the bus. The unit had been cleared in April 2004. No items catalogued. No records of contents. Detectives tracked the ID used to rent the unit. A driver's license number that belonged to a man who had died in 1998. Identity theft. Deliberate. They traced CCTV from neighboring businesses still archived in private security backups. After weeks of sifting through degraded tapes, they found a fleeting image. A white sedan parked outside the storage complex on March 18 at 11:02 p.m. Timestamp consistent. The driver stepped out briefly. Face obscured by shadow. But the vehicle, the shape of the rear bumper, a small dent near the left tail light, matched old insurance photos of Hargreaves' Camry before he claimed to have sold it. Police confronted him again in late 2019. This time, his composure cracked, just slightly. He admitted renting a storage unit in 2004, but claimed it was for mechanical parts. When asked why he used a false name and stolen ID, he said he didn't trust paperwork. When shown the CCTV still of the white sedan, he insisted it wasn't his. Lots of white Camrys back then, he muttered. Investigators requested ground-penetrating radar scans of the redeveloped Barlow Street site. Developers cooperated reluctantly. Beneath the concrete foundations, anomalies appeared, irregular soil disturbances consistent with previous excavation. A court order was obtained. Excavation began in early 2020. 4 days, workers drilled and cut through reinforced slabs. The sound echoed like distant thunder across the construction zone. Reporters gathered again, cameras perched, breath held. At 2 meters below the surface of what had once been Storage Unit 14, a section of soil revealed fragments of fabric. Gray cotton. Faded. Nearby, a human bone, small, brittle, unmistakable. The site went silent. Forensic teams descended with meticulous precision. More remains surfaced. A partial skeleton. Personal items corroded by time, a silver necklace shaped like a small star. Erin had worn one like it daily, a gift from her grandmother. Dental records confirmed what Sydney had both feared and anticipated for 16 years. Erin Walsh had been there all along. Buried beneath concrete. Beneath commerce. Beneath time. The discovery detonated across the country. Sydney 2004 disappearance solved. Headlines roared prematurely. But solved is a dangerous word. Because finding her body answered one question and ignited a dozen more. Cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the skull. A single decisive blow. No evidence of prolonged captivity. No defensive wounds indicating extended struggle. It suggested swiftness. Efficiency. Pre-planning. And inside the soil near her remains, investigators found something else. A fragment of duct tape with degraded adhesive. On its inner surface, trace DNA. This time, the sample was stronger. When processed through the national database in mid-2021, it produced a match. Daniel Hargreaves. The man with the white Camry. The cash withdrawal. The false storage rental. The rehearsed calm. He was arrested at his Queensland home without incident. But as handcuffs closed around his wrists, one truth settled over the case like dust in a long-abandoned room: this was no random act. No spontaneous crime of opportunity. It had been deliberate, patient, calculated. And as Sydney watched the news that night, the headline changed tone. No longer just missing. No longer cold case. Now it was murder. Yet even with DNA, even with a burial site, even with a suspect in custody, the story was far from over. Because motive remained buried deeper than concrete. And the question lingered in every mind: had Erin been chosen at random, or had she been watched, studied, targeted long before that quiet March night, when a window slid open and a white sedan waited in the dark? The arrest of Daniel Hargreaves did not bring relief. It brought noise. Sirens outside a quiet Queensland duplex. Cameras flashing against drawn curtains. Reporters shouting questions that bounced off brick walls and fell unanswered onto the pavement. 16 years after Erin Walsh vanished into the dark, a man was finally in custody. And yet the air felt heavier, not lighter. Because now the story had a face. Hargreaves was 44 when police led him into the station, older, broader, hair thinning at the temples. He did not resist. He did not shout. He asked for a lawyer before the first formal question was completed. Calm. Measured. The same composure that had unsettled detectives years earlier. In the interrogation room, fluorescent lights hummed. A recorder blinked red. Detectives placed photographs on the metal table one by one: the bus still frame, the bedroom window, the excavation site on Barlow Street, the silver star necklace sealed in evidence plastic. He studied each image without visible tremor. When confronted with the DNA match from the duct tape, his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Not shock. Not outrage. Calculation. The forensic report was precise. The adhesive side of the tape fragment contained a mixture of profiles, Erin's and his. The probability of another unrelated individual matching was astronomically low. It wasn't circumstantial anymore. It was biological. He shifted strategy. Through his lawyer, Hargreaves suggested secondary transfer. Claimed he had once dated a woman who knew Erin casually. Suggested his DNA could have been carried indirectly. The explanation sounded thin even before it left his mouth. Detectives pressed further. Phone metadata. Storage unit rental under a false identity. Cash withdrawal. The partial DNA on the bedroom window frame that, while degraded, was now statistically consistent with his full profile. Each piece alone was fragile. Together, they formed a tightening circle. Still, he did not confess. The prosecution began assembling its case in late 2021. Forensic timelines were reconstructed with clinical precision. Experts prepared to testify about soil composition linking the burial site to residues found in the trunk lining of a vehicle Hargreaves owned years later. Fibers recovered from the excavation matched manufacturing batches of duct tape sold in Western Sydney hardware stores in early 2004. It was meticulous. Led. Relentless. But motive remained the silent void at the center. Investigators combed through Hargreaves' past again, this time without restraint. Old computers were seized. Hard drives recovered from storage lockers in Queensland. Digital forensics specialists worked through obsolete file systems, resurrecting fragments thought erased forever. What they found was chilling in its mundanity. Archived internet search histories from early 2004. Terms like bus routes Parramatta Road. University class schedules Sydney. How long does concrete take to cure? And one search, dated March 12, 2004, Missing Persons Media Coverage Australia. It wasn't proof of obsession, but it painted intent. Witnesses from Erin's university were re-interviewed. One classmate recalled seeing a man sitting in a car outside campus more than once that semester. She remembered because he didn't look like a student. Older. Watching. At the time, it had felt harmless. In hindsight, it curdled. A former co-worker from the cafe remembered Erin mentioning a creepy guy who lingered near closing time weeks before she disappeared. She had laughed it off. Said he never came inside, just stood across the street smoking. No report had been filed. No description detailed enough for a sketch. The trial commenced in mid-2023 inside a packed Sydney courtroom. The Walsh family sat in the front row, hands clasped so tightly their knuckles blanched white. Media lined the back benches. The public watched through live updates, every detail dissected in real time. The prosecution's opening statement was direct. This was a calculated abduction and murder executed with premeditation. They argued that Hargreaves had surveilled Erin's routine, purchased burner phones to coordinate the encounter, lured her from her bedroom window under false pretenses, restrained her with duct tape, transported her to the storage unit, killed her swiftly, and concealed her beneath concrete he later ensured would be poured when the units were redeveloped. The defense countered with doubt. Circumstantial links. Contaminated evidence. A degraded crime scene disturbed by excavation. They emphasized the absence of eyewitness testimony placing Erin inside his vehicle. They questioned the integrity of a 16-year-old investigation, revived under public pressure. For days, forensic experts explained DNA transfer probabilities in language both technical and devastating. The duct tape fragment became the centerpiece. Jurors leaned forward as charts displayed genetic markers aligning with mathematical certainty. Then came the testimony about the storage unit. Rental documents forged with a dead man's identity. CCTV stills enhanced frame by frame showing the white Camry's distinctive dent. Soil analysts describing how microscopic mineral traces embedded in Erin's clothing matched samples from Barlow Street, and nowhere else in Sydney with such composition. Hargreaves watched impassively. When Erin's mother took the stand, the courtroom shifted. Her voice trembled but did not break. She described the open window, the untouched phone, the years of birthdays marked by absence. The moment police told her they had found remains beneath concrete. She did not look at Hargreaves. The defense chose not to put him on the stand. Instead, they introduced a theory that Erin had met someone else that night, that Hargreaves' DNA presence at the burial site was the result of unrelated activity at the storage unit, that the prosecution's narrative was a story stitched together from coincidence and grief. But the timeline resisted that narrative. The burner phones activated in tandem. The tower pings triangulating near her home. The cash withdrawal. The false identity. The burial site tied directly to him. Closing arguments felt less like debate and more like inevitability. The jury deliberated for 4 days. Outside the courthouse, news vans idled just as a white sedan once had years before. The city held its breath again, this time not for a missing girl, but for a verdict that would finally define what happened in 2004. When the jurors returned, their faces were unreadable. Guilty. Murder. The word echoed through the chamber with a force that seemed to bend time. 16 years collapsed into a single syllable. Erin Walsh was no longer legally missing. She was acknowledged as what she had been since that night, a victim of deliberate violence. Hargreaves showed little reaction as the sentence was handed down, life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 30 years. He stared straight ahead, jaw set, eyes fixed on nothing. But even in conviction, there were fractures. During sentencing, the judge noted that while the evidence proved Hargreaves' guilt beyond reasonable doubt, certain elements remained unknown: the exact method used to lure Erin from her window, whether he acted entirely alone in preparation, the precise sequence of events inside the storage unit before her death. Mysteries nested inside resolution. After the trial, investigators revisited the question that had haunted them from the beginning. How did he convince her to open that window? Phone records suggested a call moments before she left her room. One of the burner phones connected briefly to a landline belonging to the Walsh household at 10:28 p.m. It rang once. Disconnected. A signal. A pre-arranged cue. Prosecutors theorized he had told her he had information, or posed as someone she trusted, or created a scenario urgent enough to override caution. But without a confession, the final minutes of Erin's life remained shadows. In prison interviews requested by journalists, Hargreaves declined to explain himself. He maintained partial innocence, never fully admitting the act despite the verdict. The absence of remorse was a fresh wound. For the Walsh family, closure was complicated. They had a grave now, a place to bring flowers, a court ruling that named the monster. But they did not have answers to every question that had stalked them through sleepless nights. Sydney absorbed the outcome with a strange mix of relief and discomfort. The case that had once symbolized vulnerability in suburbia now symbolized something else: the persistence of evidence, the slow grind of forensic science, the idea that even the most carefully buried secrets can surface under enough pressure. Yet the image that lingered was not the courtroom or the excavation site. It was still that bedroom window. Slightly open. Curtain shifting in the night breeze. A young woman standing on the other side, phone perhaps buzzing softly, believing for a fleeting second that she was stepping into something harmless. The white sedan waiting with headlights off. The engine running. And a city that would spend 16 years chasing the sound of that engine fading into darkness, only to realize that the truth had been sealed under concrete all along, patient, silent, and waiting to be unearthed. Conviction did not quiet the city. It unsettled it in a different way. For 16 years, Erin Walsh had been a question mark, a missing poster curling at the edges, a face frozen in 2004. Now she was a confirmed victim of murder, and Daniel Hargreaves was officially the man who took her life. The headline read clean and sharp: Sydney 2004 disappearance solved. But inside the details, nothing felt clean. Because solving a case in court is not the same as understanding it. In the weeks after sentencing, investigators returned to the evidence vault with a new objective. Not to prove guilt, that had been done, but to understand the architecture of the crime. How long had he been watching? How many times had he rehearsed the route from Parramatta Road to Barlow Street in his mind? How many nights had that white Camry idled unseen while Erin walked past, unaware? Digital forensics, freed from the pressure of trial deadlines, dug deeper into recovered hard drives. Fragments of deleted files were reconstructed like charred paper reassembled after a fire. Among them, a folder dated February 2004. Inside, scanned maps of Western Sydney. Bus timetables. Handwritten notes photographed and stored as image files. One image stood out. A zoomed-in map of Erin's Street, with a small X marked near the corner where the dog walker had once reported a white sedan waiting. It wasn't random. It wasn't impulsive. It was cartography. Psychological profilers began drafting reports not for court, but for record, an attempt to define what kind of predator studies bus schedules and window heights. They described patience, control, an offender who derived power not from chaos, but from precision. The open window had never been opportunity. It had been the objective. But another question pressed harder now. Had Erin truly been the only one? Police cross-referenced Hargreaves' known movements between 1998 and 2010 with unsolved disappearances across New South Wales and Queensland. The database search lit up with possibilities, too many to ignore, too few to confirm. 3 cases bore uncomfortable similarities: young women, late-night routines, minimal forensic evidence, vehicles reported but never identified. None had bodies found beneath concrete. None had DNA tying back to him. But the patterns were enough to keep detectives awake. In 2024, a task force quietly reopened 2 of those files. The first involved a 22-year-old hospitality worker who vanished from a train platform in Newcastle in 2001. Witnesses recalled a white sedan parked illegally near the station that night. The registration had never been captured. The second case dated to 2007, Brisbane outskirts. A university student who disappeared after telling a friend she felt she was being followed. Hargreaves had been living in Queensland by then. Investigators visited him in prison with questions not tied to Erin's case. He refused to engage. Stared at the table. Requested counsel. The silence was strategic. Without physical evidence linking him to those disappearances, the inquiries hovered in limbo. Meanwhile, the Walsh family faced a new reality, one without court dates, without investigative updates, without the frantic hope that today might bring news. Erin's remains were laid to rest in a small cemetery overlooking the outskirts of Sydney. The funeral was private, intimate, heavy with years of postponed grief. Her mother placed the silver star necklace into the casket before it was sealed. But even as they tried to grieve, fresh revelations surfaced. A former inmate, who had briefly shared a correctional facility transport with Hargreaves, contacted authorities in late 2024. He claimed that during a long drive between facilities, Hargreaves had muttered something under his breath while watching news coverage on a guard's radio. They never looked at the river, he allegedly said. The statement was vague. Possibly fabricated. Prison informants are currency traders in rumor. But detectives could not ignore it. They searched archived files. In 2004, dive teams had focused on small ponds and drainage canals near Erin's home. The Parramatta River had been considered too broad, too exposed, too unlikely for a swift concealment. Still, sonar scans were ordered in early 2025 for a stretch of river near an industrial loading dock less than 3 kilometers from Barlow Street. Nothing. No secondary remains. No discarded weapon. Just silt and forgotten debris. But the river comment lingered like an unfinished sentence. Forensic psychologists analyzing Hargreaves' prison behavior noted something unsettling. He consumed media coverage of his own case obsessively. Requested transcripts. Read every article. Filed minor complaints about how journalists described his demeanor in court. It wasn't remorse. It was control over narrative. In a rare written statement submitted during an appeal attempt, he included a line that caught investigators' attention: "You only know what you can prove." It was less a denial than a challenge. The appeal was dismissed. The conviction stood firm. The DNA, the storage unit, the burner phones, the evidence was unshakable. But that sentence echoed in the corridors of the cold case unit. You only know what you can prove. Detectives revisited the earliest days of 2004 once more, this time focusing not on Erin, but on Hargreaves' environment. Financial stresses. Relationship breakdowns. Employment records. In February of that year, he had been formally reprimanded at work for inappropriate comments toward a female customer. 2 weeks later, he withdrew $2,000 in cash. Days after that, he rented the storage unit under a false identity. Escalation. His internet history also revealed a forum account under a pseudonym, dormant for years, but active in early 2004. The posts were cryptic. Discussions about urban invisibility. Threads analyzing how long it takes police to classify a missing adult as a homicide. One chilling comment read, "If there's no body, there's no clock." He had understood the power of absence. And for 16 years, absence had shielded him. The public response to these revelations was visceral. Talkback radio crackled with anger. Online forums dissected every scrap of new information. Parents replayed old warnings to their children. Universities strengthened campus escort programs. Suburban streets that once felt insulated now carried a faint afterimage of vulnerability. But amid the noise, a quieter truth surfaced. Erin had not been chosen because she was reckless. She had been chosen because she was visible, predictable in the way most people are when they believe the world is fundamentally safe. Her routine had been her vulnerability. Her kindness, perhaps, exploited. A window slightly open on a warm March night transformed into a calculated access point. The final reconstruction presented by investigators in 2025 was clinical, almost surgical in its clarity. Hargreaves surveilled Erin for weeks, mapping her schedule. On March 18, he positioned himself near her bus stop with one burner phone while activating the second near her house. He placed a brief call to the Walsh landline, a prearranged signal he had likely convinced her to expect. Perhaps posing as someone with information, perhaps fabricating urgency. When she opened the window and stepped outside, he was waiting within meters. The abduction swift. The transport immediate. The storage unit prepared in advance. Blunt force trauma delivered inside that concrete shell. Duct tape used to restrain. Burial executed before dawn. Efficient. Contained. Designed to leave nothing behind. Except it had. A fragment of adhesive. A degraded DNA strand. A dent in a white Camry caught in the corner of an old security frame. Time had eroded his confidence more than it had erased his trail. And yet, even with every reconstructed minute laid bare, the emotional center of the case remained intangible. What did Erin think in those final moments? Did she recognize him? Did she realize too late that the quiet street had been watched, measured, studied? Those answers were locked inside a mind that refused to speak. In 2026, on the 22nd anniversary of her disappearance, a memorial plaque was installed near the original bus stop on Parramatta Road. It bore her name, her dates, and a simple line, "Forever 19. Commuters pause there sometimes. Not long. Just enough to read. To remember. Traffic hums past, indifferent. New buses arrive, doors hissing open. Young students step off with earbuds in, staring at glowing screens, unaware of the history beneath their feet. The jacaranda trees still bloom purple in spring. The Walsh house has new owners. The bedroom window was replaced years ago, frame upgraded, glass thicker. But if you stand on that sidewalk at night, when the street is quiet and the air carries the distant sound of engines along Parramatta Road, you can almost imagine it. A white sedan idling with its headlights off, a phone ringing once in the dark, and a single decision made in a fraction of a second that would ripple outward for decades. The case is closed on paper. The sentence pronounced. The grave marked. But the shadow it cast over Sydney in 2004 does not vanish with a verdict. It lingers in routines. In open windows. In the assumption that nothing ever happens here. Because once it did. And the city will never quite forget the night a 19-year-old stepped into the dark, and the dark had been waiting. After the conviction, Sydney tried to breathe again. The headlines faded from front pages to archived links. Court sketches of Daniel Hargreaves were replaced by new scandals, new tragedies, new names. But beneath the surface, something irreversible had shifted. The Erin Walsh case was no longer just a solved murder. It had become a study in patience, the patience of a predator and the patience of evidence. Inside the New South Wales Cold Case Unit, detectives refused to close the broader file. Erin's murder had been proven. But patterns rarely exist in isolation. They began with geography. When analysts plotted Hargreaves' known addresses from 1998 to 2010 against unsolved disappearances, the overlaps formed a jagged constellation across New South Wales and Queensland. Western Sydney, Newcastle, Brisbane outskirts, industrial corridors, transport hubs, places where routine meets shadow. One case in particular refused to stay quiet: the 2001 disappearance of Melissa Grant from a Newcastle train platform. CCTV from that era had been minimal, but one grainy frame captured a white sedan parked illegally near the station entrance minutes before she vanished. The footage had been too unclear to identify the make at the time. Now, enhanced with modern software, the rear contour looked eerily familiar. Detectives pulled old vehicle registration data. In 2001, Hargreaves had owned a white Ford Laser before the Camry. The shape matched more closely than anyone wanted to admit. There was no DNA. No burial site. No storage unit link. But Melissa's family had described something hauntingly similar to Erin's early weeks: anonymous hang-up calls before she disappeared. A sense of being watched. A routine mapped too carefully. Police obtained a court order to retest archived evidence from the Newcastle case. A scarf recovered near the station had been logged and stored, but never fully processed for touch DNA due to technological limits at the time. It was sent to the lab in early 2026. Weeks later, the results returned. Inconclusive. Not negative. Not positive. Degraded beyond reliable comparison. The past had decayed just enough to remain ambiguous. Still, the possibility hung in the air. Meanwhile, Hargreaves' behavior in prison grew more erratic. Correctional officers noted that he became agitated whenever news segments mentioned cold cases. He filed formal complaints about media harassment, despite being incarcerated. He requested access to law books on appeal strategy, and spent hours drafting letters that were never mailed. One intercepted note, written but unsent, contained a single chilling line: "They still don't know everything." Investigators debated whether it was bravado or truth. In mid-2026, an unexpected development reignited public attention. A construction crew renovating an old industrial site near Brisbane uncovered human remains beneath a concrete slab, a shallow burial consistent with early 2000s construction patterns. The remains belonged to a woman estimated to have died between 2006 and 2008. Age range mid-20s. No immediate identification. The location sat less than 6 kilometers from an apartment Hargreaves had rented in 2007. Media outlets wasted no time drawing connections. Another concrete burial flashed across screens. The phrase echoed Erin's case with brutal familiarity. Forensic teams worked methodically. Dental records eventually identified the remains as Laura Chen, a 24-year-old accounting student who had disappeared in 2007 after telling friends she felt someone had been following her for weeks. The similarities were impossible to ignore. Laura's case had gone cold after initial searches yielded nothing. No suspect. No body. No confirmed sightings after the night she left her part-time tutoring job. Now she had been found beneath concrete. Police compared soil samples, burial depth, duct tape fibers. The composition of the adhesive used in Laura's case matched a different manufacturing batch than the one used in Erin's murder. Same brand family, different lot. It suggested access, not coincidence. More importantly, a fragment of fabric recovered near Laura's remains contained trace male DNA. The lab processed it under maximum sensitivity protocols. The result came back weeks later. Partial match to Daniel Hargreaves. Strong enough to warrant formal charges pending further corroboration. The city's breath hitched again. From prison, Hargreaves denied involvement through his lawyer. Claimed contamination. Claimed media conspiracy. Claimed coincidence. But investigators saw the emerging pattern: surveillance, preparation, concrete concealment, blunt force trauma. The method was evolving, but the architecture was consistent. In interviews conducted years earlier, neighbors had described Hargreaves as quiet, polite, forgettable. The kind of man who blended into hardware stores and petrol stations without leaving an impression. That invisibility had been his camouflage. Detectives now believed Erin may not have been the first rehearsal. She may have been the first perfected execution. The prosecution prepared a second case. Meanwhile, forensic accountants traced Hargreaves' financial records during 2006 to 2007. Another large cash withdrawal appeared days before Laura vanished. Another short-term storage rental under a false identity, this time in Brisbane's industrial fringe. The rental records had been archived and nearly destroyed before being recovered during the renewed investigation. Inside that unit, years ago, construction had occurred quickly. Concrete poured. Slab sealed. Business moved on. Time, again, had hidden him. Public reaction shifted from shock to something colder: realization. The predator, who had haunted Sydney's memory, might have extended far beyond one suburb, one victim, 1 year. Erin Walsh's case had cracked open a door that investigators now feared led to a corridor of unlit rooms. Psychological profiling expanded accordingly. Experts suggested that offenders who successfully conceal a body often escalate, emboldened by the absence of consequence. The 16 years Hargreaves lived freely after Erin's murder may not have been dormant. They may have been active. Police reopened missing persons reports within a 300-kilometer radius of his residences between 1998 and 2010. Names resurfaced. Faces long absent from headlines. Families who had once grieved quietly were suddenly thrust back into interviews, microphones hovering inches from old wounds. Each family asked the same question with trembling hope and dread: was it him? Investigators could not answer yet. Back in Sydney, the Walsh family watched these developments with a complicated mixture of anguish and validation. If more victims were confirmed, it would mean Erin was not alone in suffering at his hands. But it would also mean the horror had multiplied unchecked for years. In late 2026, while awaiting formal charges in the Laura Chen case, Hargreaves made a calculated move. Through his attorney, he offered to provide information in exchange for prison privileges and a potential sentence negotiation. Prosecutors refused to bargain without specifics. He requested a private meeting with detectives. The room was stark, concrete walls painted pale gray. A single camera recording. He entered slower now, age and incarceration visible in his posture. He placed his hands flat on the table and looked directly at Detective Harris, who had requested to be present despite nearing retirement. For a moment, 16 years collapsed between them. "You want to know how she opened the window," Hargreaves said quietly. Silence filled the space. He did not smile. He did not gloat. His voice was measured, almost academic. "I told her I had proof. Proof of what? He did not elaborate. Detectives pressed him. What proof? Of who? Of what danger? He leaned back slightly. She believed me, he said. That's all that matters. It wasn't a full confession. It wasn't an apology. It was a fragment, a glimpse into manipulation sharper than force. The implication was devastating. He had convinced Erin that stepping outside was necessary. Urgent. Perhaps protective. The trust he exploited may have been built over weeks of silent observation, subtle signals, calculated proximity. The meeting ended without further clarity. He requested counsel and withdrew cooperation. But that single sentence reframed the final minutes of 2004 in brutal detail. She hadn't stepped into darkness blindly. She had stepped into what she thought was information. Outside, the world continued, buses hissing to stops, jacarandas blooming, commuters scrolling past old headlines. Yet beneath the surface, investigators kept digging, not just into soil, but into years of overlooked disappearances, into forgotten storage leases, into archived CCTV tapes flickering with ghost-like vehicles. The story that began as one missing 19-year-old had evolved into something wider, darker, more systemic. Concrete cracks eventually. DNA endures. And in quiet interrogation rooms, truths leak out not as confessions, but as fragments, enough to suggest that the solved case of 2004 may only be one chapter, in a longer ledger, still being uncovered. The engine that idled on Parramatta Road that night did not just carry a single victim into the dark. It may have been running long before, and long after, anyone realized what it was capable of. The moment Daniel Hargreaves said, "I told her I had proof," the case shifted again. Not legally. Not yet. But psychologically. For 16 years, investigators had imagined force, a sudden grab, a weapon flashed in the dark, a struggle cut short. Now a different image took hold. A conversation through a window. A voice low and urgent. A lie delivered with calm precision. Proof. Proof of what? Blackmail. Fabricated danger. A claim that someone she knew was in trouble. Detectives reconstructed possibilities like architects of a nightmare. Erin had no known secrets, no hidden scandals, no online disputes. But predators don't need truth. They need leverage. Even imagined leverage. Phone records from March 2004 were revisited again, this time not just for numbers dialed, but for patterns of silence. In the weeks before her disappearance, Erin's mobile showed several brief calls from withheld numbers, seconds long, ending before voicemail could engage. At the time, investigators assumed telemarketers or misdials. Now, the timing felt deliberate. Conditioning. Testing responsiveness. Establishing a rhythm. A ring. A disconnect. A seed planted. Forensic linguists were brought in to analyze Hargreaves' limited prison statements. The phrasing was revealing. She believed me. Not I tricked her. Not I forced her. The emphasis was on her action, not his. A subtle displacement of responsibility, classic manipulative cognition. Meanwhile, in Brisbane, the Laura Chen investigation intensified. The partial DNA recovered from fabric near her remains underwent advanced sequencing unavailable during Erin's trial. This time, the match to Hargreaves reached prosecutorial threshold. Formal charges were filed in late 2026. 2 concrete graves. 2 young women. 2 cities. The pattern was no longer theoretical. Detectives mapped the timeline between Erin's murder in 2004 and Laura's in 2007. 3 years. What happened in between? Employment records showed Hargreaves moved frequently, short leases, temporary contracts. Enough mobility to obscure routine. Enough stability to avoid suspicion. Then another detail surfaced. In 2005, a complaint had been filed in Western Sydney by a university student who reported a man claiming to have urgent information about her roommate. He had approached her near a bus stop at night, insisting she step aside to talk privately. She refused. He left in a white sedan. The report went nowhere, no plate captured, no assault committed. The description matched Hargreaves' appearance at the time. It suggested rehearsal. Testing scripts. Refining approach. Police reopened that 2005 complaint and re-interviewed the woman, now in her 40s. When shown a recent photo of Hargreaves, she went quiet for a long moment before nodding once. "I can't be certain," she said. "But it feels like him." Feels like him. Not enough for court. Enough for pattern recognition. Back in prison, Hargreaves grew increasingly agitated as news coverage linked him to Laura Chen's death. He filed motions alleging evidence mishandling. Claimed contamination from shared forensic facilities. His appeals were procedural, technical, desperate. But beneath the legal maneuvering, something else emerged. A prison psychologist assigned to monitor high-profile inmates documented a shift in his demeanor. He began referring to the cases not as accusations, but as projects. During one session, when asked about empathy, he responded, "You're assuming there was emotion involved." The absence in that statement was more chilling than anger. In early 2027, investigators executed a search warrant on a rural property outside Toowoomba once owned briefly by a relative of Hargreaves. Property records showed he had access to the land in 2008 for several months. It was isolated. Dense brush. Old machinery sheds half collapsed under rusted tin. Ground-penetrating radar scanned sections of soil that appeared previously disturbed. An anomaly appeared near an abandoned well. Excavation began carefully, methodically. Media helicopters hovered at a distance, lenses trained downward like mechanical vultures. After 3 days of digging, forensic teams uncovered animal remains. Livestock bones. Nothing human. Another dead end. But even false leads were revealing something critical. The scope of potential activity was wider than anyone had understood in 2004. The predator, who buried one victim under concrete, might have experimented with other methods, other terrains. The Laura Chen trial began in late 2027. Prosecutors presented similarities with Erin's case without overstepping legal boundaries. Concrete burial. Cash withdrawals before disappearance. False storage rental under alias. Duct tape. Blunt force trauma. The defense attacked the partial nature of the DNA match, emphasizing degradation and the absence of a complete profile. They argued coincidence. They argued investigative tunnel vision fueled by Erin's conviction. But then a new witness took the stand, a former hardware store employee in Brisbane, who remembered a man purchasing multiple bags of quickset concrete and industrial duct tape in June 2007. The purchase had stood out because he insisted on paying in cash and declined a receipt. Shown an old driver's license photo of Hargreaves, the employee hesitated, then confirmed, "That looks like him." Circumstantial, yes. But layered atop DNA and rental records, it tightened the net. Halfway through the trial, Hargreaves requested to address the court. Against his lawyer's advice, he stood. His voice was steady. "You think you've mapped everything," he said. "You haven't." Gasps rippled through the gallery. The judge ordered him to confine remarks to relevant defense points. He complied outwardly, but the damage was done. You haven't. The implications spread like smoke. Was it intimidation? Psychological warfare? Or confession disguised as arrogance? The jury deliberated for 6 days. Guilty. Second conviction. Life sentence extended. Laura Chen's family wept in relief that mirrored the Walsh family's years earlier. Another name removed from the missing persons registry and placed, finally, into history with clarity. But the question persisted, were there more? Investigators revisited unsolved disappearances once again, this time with greater urgency. Advances in forensic genealogy were considered. Environmental DNA sampling from old vehicle impound lots. Even archived landfill sites near former storage facilities were examined through historical waste management records. The work became exhaustive, almost obsessive. And still, no third body surfaced. By 2028, Hargreaves had retreated into silence. No more interviews. No more cryptic statements. He spent hours in the prison library, occasionally drafting notes he never submitted. His health began to decline subtly, weight loss, insomnia, documented stress responses. One afternoon, during a routine cell search, correctional officers discovered a notebook hidden beneath his mattress. Inside were pages filled with maps. Not of Sydney or Brisbane this time. Of smaller towns along the Pacific Highway. Some marked with circles. Others crossed out. The dates scribbled in margins ranged from 1999 to 2009. Investigators seized the notebook immediately. Cross-referencing those locations with missing persons reports produced several overlaps, but none with sufficient evidence to pursue charges. The notebook could have been fantasy. Could have been recollection. Could have been nothing more than an attempt to provoke further scrutiny. But it reignited fear. Because the man who once relied on invisibility had now become hypervisible, and yet still managed to suggest there were corners unexplored. In Sydney, life moved forward as it always does. Students boarded buses along Parramatta Road unaware of how closely their routines once mirrored a victim's final night. The memorial plaque weathered under sun and rain. Flowers appeared each March, placed quietly by hands that remembered. Erin Walsh's name had transformed from missing to murdered to symbol, a reminder that predators can study the ordinary until it becomes a blueprint. But even as 2 convictions stood firm, even as concrete graves had been opened and secrets dragged into daylight, the final architecture of Daniel Hargreaves' history remained partially obscured. Because when a man says, "You only know what you can prove," and later adds, "You haven't mapped everything," he is either bluffing or he is telling the truth. And somewhere in the silent stretches between mapped towns and archived files, investigators continue to trace lines across years, searching for patterns that may confirm whether the engine that idled in 2004 had stopped with 2 victims, or whether its echo still lingers in places no one has thought to dig yet. By 2029, Daniel Hargreaves had become a name that carried weight far beyond a single courtroom verdict. 2 life sentences. 2 concrete graves. 2 families who finally had somewhere to bring flowers. And yet inside the cold case unit, no one used the word finished. Because the notebook changed everything. When correctional officers found it beneath his mattress, pages filled with hand-drawn maps, circles around rural towns, dates scribbled in narrow margins, it wasn't just a curiosity. It was potential evidence. Or potential theater. With Hargreaves, the line between confession and manipulation was razor-thin. Investigators digitized every page. Geographic analysts overlaid the marked towns with national missing persons databases from 1998 to 2010. A pattern began to emerge, not perfect, not clean, but persistent. Small transport hubs. Highway rest stops. University campuses in regional centers. Places where routine repeats and strangers blend. One town circled twice in thick pen stood out, Kempsey, New South Wales. Population modest. Traffic steady along the Pacific Highway. In August 2002, a 20-year-old backpacker, named Isla Morgan, had disappeared after leaving a hostel near the riverfront. Her belongings were found untouched in her shared dorm. No signs of struggle. No confirmed sightings after dusk. At the time, police theorized she had met someone voluntarily. Maybe left town impulsively. Without a body, without witnesses, the case drifted into the archives. Hargreaves had been working a short-term mechanical contract, less than 40 kilometers from Kempsey that summer. Detectives reopened Isla's file. Witness statements were re-examined. One mentioned a white sedan parked near the hostel several evenings that week. The description had been too vague to act on in 2002. Now it sounded like a refrain. But unlike Erin and Laura, there was no storage unit linked to Kempsey. No concrete slab with a hollow beneath it. The notebook page for Kempsey had something different, a small X drawn near a river bend. The Macleay River. Dive teams were assembled in early 2030. Sonar equipment scanned murky depths where currents shifted sediment constantly. The search was slow, methodical, uncertain. On the fifth day, sonar detected an irregular shape lodged near submerged debris. Divers descended. They surfaced with fragments, bone, fabric remnants tangled in rusted metal. Time had done its work brutally. But forensic analysis confirmed human remains. Dental reconstruction and mitochondrial DNA comparison with Isla Morgan's surviving relatives confirmed identity weeks later. 18 years missing. Now found beneath dark water. Cause of death was impossible to determine conclusively after so long, but a hairline fracture in the recovered skull suggested blunt force trauma, a familiar signature. There was no duct tape preserved. No storage rental records. Just a river and a mark in a notebook. When confronted in prison, Hargreaves said nothing. He stared at the detective across the table with the same unreadable expression he had worn for decades. When told Isla's remains had been identified, he blinked once and asked for water. No confession. No denial. But the silence was no longer neutral. It was heavy. A third victim. Public reaction shifted from shock to something closer to reckoning. News commentators began using a phrase previously avoided: serial offender. The narrative of a single calculated murder had transformed into a sequence spanning years and states. Psychologists revisited their profiles. The evolution was visible now. Erin's case showed preparation and concealment under concrete, permanence, control. Laura's mirrored that method. Isla's burial in water suggested experimentation before refinement. Disposal strategy developing over time. Predators learn. And Hargreaves, it seemed, had been studying not just routines of victims, but his own techniques. Investigators returned to the notebook. Several towns circled had no corresponding missing persons reports. Others had disappearances ruled accidental or voluntary years earlier. Each location became a question mark. Each question mark demanded manpower, funding, time. Resources stretched thin. Families from cold cases decades old began calling police stations again, voices trembling between hope and dread. Was it him, they asked. The answer was rarely definitive. In mid-2030, forensic accountants uncovered another financial anomaly. In July 2002, weeks before Isla vanished, Hargreaves withdrew $1,500 in cash. The pattern repeated, cash before disappearance, mobility, temporary employment. The architecture was consistent even when the disposal method varied. Detectives built a comprehensive timeline of his movements from 1998 onward. Employment contracts, lease agreements, vehicle registrations, traffic infringements. Each data point a breadcrumb. What emerged was chilling in its normalcy. He moved like any itinerant worker. Short-term contracts. Modest rentals. Nothing that screamed predator. No prior convictions for violent crime before Erin. No obvious triggers. Just a man blending into landscapes while mapping them quietly. One of the circled towns in the notebook remained uncomfortably unexplored, Grafton. No known missing persons matching his timeline. No obvious cold cases. But the date scrawled beside it was 2003. 1 year before Erin. Investigators scanned hospital records from that year. Emergency admissions. Assault reports. An anomaly surfaced. An unidentified female admitted briefly in late 2003 after being found disoriented near a roadside. She claimed she had been struck from behind, but couldn't recall details. She declined to press charges. The report described a white sedan seen leaving the area. The woman was located in 2030, now living interstate. She agreed to speak. Her memory was fragmented. She remembered a man approaching her outside a late-night convenience store claiming he had information about her younger brother. Urgency. Calm tone. She stepped closer to hear him. Then, nothing until hospital lights. She survived. Shown a recent photo of Hargreaves, she inhaled sharply but hesitated. I can't be certain, she whispered. But something about his eyes. Not evidence. But resonance. The pattern sharpened further, approach with information. Isolate. Strike. Remove. Erin had opened her window because she believed there was proof of something. Isla may have stepped outside the hostel for similar urgency. Laura had told a friend she was going to meet someone briefly before heading home. Proof. Information. Urgency weaponized. In 2031, with 3 confirmed victims and 1 probable assault survivor, a national task force was formally established to audit unsolved disappearances across Eastern Australia from 1998 to 2010 linked geographically to Hargreaves' known movements. The scale was immense. Data analysts fed thousands of cases into algorithmic comparison models, vehicle descriptions, pre-disappearance phone anomalies, cash withdrawal patterns from local suspects, reports of men approaching women with urgent claims. Most cases filtered out quickly. Some lingered uncomfortably. But no 4th body surfaced that year. In prison, Hargreaves' health deteriorated further. Hypertension. Chronic insomnia. Psychological evaluations described increasing isolation. He refused therapy sessions. Declined opportunities to clarify unresolved cases in exchange for privileges. He seemed content to let uncertainty breathe. And that uncertainty gnawed at investigators more than silence ever had. Because solving Erin's disappearance had cracked open a sequence of buried truths, but it also revealed the possibility that some crimes leave no concrete, no duct tape, no river anomaly, just absence. Sydney marked the 27th anniversary of Erin's disappearance in 2031, with a quiet ceremony at the Parramatta Road bus stop. Her mother, older now, stood beside the plaque. Reporters asked whether justice felt complete. She looked at the traffic streaming past and said, "Justice is knowing he can't do it again." Not knowing how many times he already had. As dusk settled, buses arrived and departed on schedule. Young students stepped off, earbuds in, routines intact. The world continued in its ordinary rhythm, predictable, visible, map-like. And somewhere behind prison walls, a man who once studied bus timetables and window frames sat in silence, his notebook confiscated, his maps digitized, his secrets partially exposed. But partially is not entirely. And as long as there are circles on pages without bodies beneath them, the shadow cast in 2004 does not shrink. It stretches, thin, persistent, along highways, across river bends, into towns where nothing ever seemed to happen. Until it did. The anonymous letter arrived in a plain white envelope, no return address, no stamp smudge, just 3 words printed in block capitals: check the storage. It landed on the desk of a detective, who had almost given up saying the name Liam Mercer out loud. 7 years had passed since the 26-year-old vanished into the humid Sydney night, in 2004. 7 years of rain washing the pavement clean. 7 years of headlines fading from front pages to archived footnotes. And now this, an envelope that felt like a hand reaching up from the dark. The storage facility sat in an industrial pocket of Western Sydney, rows of corrugated steel units baking under a brutal summer sun. It was the kind of place no one noticed, a maze of rented spaces filled with forgotten furniture, old surfboards, tax files boxed and sealed. Unit 317 had been rented in 2003 under a name that meant nothing. Cash payments. No digital trail. The manager remembered nothing except that the tenant wore sunglasses even indoors. When police cut the lock, the sound echoed like a gunshot. Dust swirled. The air inside was stale, unmoving. At first glance, it looked ordinary: plastic crates, a broken desk, a rolled carpet. Then an officer's flashlight caught on something metallic near the back wall. A toolbox. Inside, wrapped in oil-stained cloth, was a silver watch engraved with 2 initials, LM. Liam Mercer had worn that watch the night he disappeared. Cold case. Missing person. Community in shock. The words came rushing back to life as the storage unit became a crime scene. Forensics teams flooded the corridor. Photographers snapped images of every surface. The toolbox was bagged. The carpet was unrolled slowly, cautiously, every movement heavy with dread. Nothing beneath it but concrete. And yet the air felt wrong. Officers described it later as oppressive, as if the room itself were holding its breath. Liam had vanished after leaving a small bar in Surrey Hills just after midnight. Friends said he was upbeat, talking about a new job, a move to Melbourne. CCTV showed him stepping onto the sidewalk, checking his phone, glancing down the street. Then a white van rolled past. Grainy footage. Headlights flaring. The van slowed. That was the last confirmed sighting. No struggle. No screams. Just a man walking out of frame and into absence. Back in 2004, police chased every lead. They questioned ex-girlfriends. They tracked down a co-worker rumored to owe Liam money. They scoured abandoned lots. Divers searched the harbor. Nothing. The case file thickened, then stagnated. Until Unit 317. The engraved watch wasn't the only item. Tucked beneath the desk, investigators found a small notebook. Most pages were blank. But on one page, a list of dates. Each date circled. Each date matched a Wednesday night in late 2003 and early 2004. Wednesdays were the nights Liam played trivia at that Surrey Hills bar. Detectives reopened interviews. They tracked down the bartender from that era, now older, wary of cameras. He remembered Liam. Friendly. Smart. He also remembered a regular, who came only on Wednesdays. A quiet man. Sat alone. Drove a white van. The name given back then had been false. Registration records from 2004 were incomplete, but a breakthrough came from an unexpected place, toll booth archives. Though digital systems were primitive compared to modern standards, a partial license plate captured near the bar that night matched an old vehicle registered to a man named Daniel Hargreaves. Hargreaves had no violent record. He worked in logistics. Lived alone. Moved houses frequently. And in 2005, he abruptly relocated interstate. Police obtained a warrant. They searched his last known Sydney address. The house had changed owners twice since he left. Renovations had been done. Floors replaced. Walls repainted. But in the backyard, beneath a patch of concrete poured in 2006, ground-penetrating radar detected an anomaly. The excavation took hours. Neighbors watched from behind fences. Media vans lined the street. The sound of jackhammers shattered the stillness. When the slab cracked open, the smell rose first. Beneath the concrete lay a shallow grave. Human remains. Male. Approximately mid-20s. The city held its breath. Forensic analysis confirmed what Liam's family had feared for years. Dental records matched. DNA sealed it. The young man, who had walked out of that bar in 2004, had never left Sydney alive. Shockwaves rippled through the community. The words "disappearance solved" splashed across screens, but they carried a bitter weight. Solved did not mean justice. Not yet. Hargreaves was tracked to a small town in Queensland. He was older now, heavier, quieter. When detectives arrived at his door, he did not resist. He simply stared at them, as if he had been expecting this knock for years. During interrogation, he denied everything. Said he didn't know Liam. Said he'd sold the van long ago. Said the concrete in his backyard was poured by contractors. But the evidence tightened like a noose. Fibers from the storage unit matched fibers found in soil samples near the grave. The oil-stained cloth wrapping the watch contained traces of soil consistent with his former backyard. And the notebook, its paper fibers traced back to a batch sold exclusively in a news agency 2 blocks from Hargreaves' old address. Still, motive remained a void. Why Liam? Investigators dug into their histories. No shared workplaces. No mutual friends. No online contact. Social media was barely emerging in 2004. But then a forensic psychologist reviewing the case noted something chilling. The circled Wednesdays in the notebook weren't random. They marked not only trivia nights, but nights when Liam left the bar alone. The pattern suggested surveillance. Predation. Hargreaves had been watching. A search of his Queensland property uncovered more unsettling clues. Hidden inside a shed were old newspaper clippings. Missing persons cases. Young men. Most unsolved. Most from the early 2000s. None linked directly to him. Not yet. The trial began amid a frenzy of media attention. Prosecutors painted Hargreaves as methodical, patient, calculating. A man who selected his victim, studied his routine, waited for isolation. Defense attorneys argued circumstantial evidence, contamination, coincidence. But the jury saw the watch. The notebook. The grave beneath concrete. After days of deliberation, the verdict came down, guilty of murder. The courtroom erupted in quiet sobs. Liam's parents clutched each other, grief and relief colliding in a single, shattering moment. Yet even as the judge pronounced a life sentence, a shadow lingered. Because Hargreaves never confessed. He never explained what happened inside that white van. Never described Liam's final moments. Never revealed whether he acted alone. And he never spoke about the other clippings in that shed. Authorities reopened several cold cases, re-examining disappearances once dismissed as unrelated. Families who had buried hope years ago found themselves staring at headlines again, wondering if their loved ones' names might surface next. Sydney in 2004 had felt like a safe city. A place of beaches, late-night bars, easy laughter. The idea that a predator could stalk its streets undetected for years unsettled something deep in the public psyche. People began revisiting their own memories. That white van seen idling at a curb. That quiet man in the corner booth. The night a friend didn't answer their phone. The storage facility closed Unit 317 permanently. The door welded shut. Workers whispered about cold drafts in the corridor, about lights flickering without cause. Superstition thrives where horror has lived. Liam Mercer's name returned to headlines, but this time with a finality that cut deeper than mystery. The case was no longer a question mark. It was a wound with edges. And yet, as years pass and the media glare dims again, one detail refuses to fade. The list of dates in that notebook extended 2 months beyond the night Liam disappeared. 2 circled Wednesdays after the murder. 2 nights no one has ever explained. Did Hargreaves plan more? Did he watch another target? Or did something interrupt him? Those blank pages in the notebook remain as haunting as the filled ones. Sydney moved forward, as cities do. New bars opened in Surrey Hills. New faces filled trivia nights. The pavement where Liam last stood bears no mark. Traffic hums. Laughter spills into the street. Life continues indifferent. But somewhere in a courtroom archive, a box labeled Mercer, Liam 2004, holds the watch, the notebook, the photographs of a concrete slab split open under a merciless sun. A disappearance solved. A life stolen. And questions that still echo in the spaces between headlines, whispering that even when a case is closed, the darkness it uncovered does not simply disappear. Prison changed nothing about Daniel Hargreaves' silence. If anything, it hardened it. Behind reinforced glass and layers of razor wire, he became a ghost in plain sight. A man who answered questions with shrugs and stared through interviewers, as if they were made of smoke. Reporters camped outside correctional gates hoping for a flicker of remorse. A crack in the facade, a single word that might explain why Liam Mercer never made it home in 2004. They got nothing. No confession. No apology. No narrative to stitch over the wound. But inside the reopened files, investigators kept circling back to those 2 extra Wednesdays in the notebook. 2 dates marked after the night Liam was abducted. 2 circles drawn with the same steady pressure. It was not a mistake. Forensic handwriting experts confirmed the ink matched the earlier entries. The timing was deliberate. Which meant that after Liam was already dead, after he was buried beneath a slab of concrete in a suburban backyard, Hargreaves was still planning. Planning what? Detectives began reconstructing his movements in the weeks following the murder. Old bank statements showed small cash withdrawals. Toll booth data revealed late-night drives through inner-city Sydney. A pattern emerged. He continued passing through Surrey Hills on Wednesdays, parking near the same bar. CCTV archives from surrounding businesses were long erased, but one grainy still recovered from a nearby convenience store showed a white van idling at the curb 2 weeks after Liam vanished. The community reeled at the implication. He had gone back. He had returned to the hunting ground. Cold case investigators widened the net. They cross-referenced missing persons reports from late 2004. One name surfaced repeatedly in internal memos, Aaron Delgado, 23, disappeared after leaving a live music venue just blocks from Liam's last known location. His case had never drawn the same media attention. No body. No suspect. Just another young man who stepped into the Sydney night and evaporated. Aaron's family had never stopped searching. When police approached them with the possibility of a connection, hope and horror collided in equal measure. They provided DNA samples again. They reopened old wounds for the sake of answers. Forensic teams exhumed unidentified remains from cases previously deemed unrelated. Soil samples were reanalyzed. Fibers were retested with technology that did not exist in 2004. Inside Hargreaves' former Queensland shed, investigators took a second look at the newspaper clippings. They were arranged chronologically, not randomly. Each article detailed a disappearance of a young man between 2001 and 2005. Margins contained faint pencil marks, ticks beside certain names. Liam's article bore a heavy underline. Aaron Delgado's clipping was there too. The revelation detonated across headlines. Serial predator. Were there more? The city braced for the possibility that Liam was not an isolated tragedy, but the visible tip of something far darker. Under mounting pressure, prosecutors sought to question Hargreaves again regarding additional cases. He agreed to one interview. Just one. Detectives traveled north, recording equipment in hand, files stacked like ammunition. He listened as they laid out the pattern. The Wednesdays. The toll records. Aaron's disappearance. The clippings. His expression never shifted. When asked directly if he had taken more than one life, he tilted his head slightly, almost amused. "You're seeing patterns because you need them," he said quietly. "People go missing. It doesn't make them mine." It was the closest he came to acknowledging the shadow surrounding him. Without physical evidence tying him to Aaron or others, charges could not be laid. The legal threshold loomed like a wall. Suspicion was not proof. Patterns were not convictions. Meanwhile, forensic teams returned to the Sydney backyard where Liam had been buried. They expanded the excavation zone, digging beyond the original grave site. Beneath layers of soil, they found disturbed earth that predated the concrete slab. A smaller pit. Empty. Empty, but deliberate. Ground-penetrating radar scans of neighboring properties yielded nothing conclusive, yet the discovery of that second pit ignited speculation. Had he prepared another grave? Had he used it and later relocated remains? Or had something interrupted him before he could complete whatever plan he had drawn in that notebook? Former neighbors began recalling details they had dismissed years ago. A foul smell in early 2004, explained away as a dead possum. Late-night hammering. A sudden decision to pour concrete for a patio project that no one ever saw finished. The weight of hindsight pressed heavily. Investigators tracked the white van's ownership history further back. It had been purchased second-hand in 2002. The seller remembered Hargreaves distinctly, paid in cash, asked no questions, declined to test drive. The van itself had long since been scrapped, compacted into anonymous metal. Any forensic treasure it once held was gone. The frustration was palpable. Every new clue illuminated the edges of a larger darkness, but refused to reveal its center. Psychological profilers constructed a chilling portrait, organized, ritualistic, patient. A man who selected victims based on routine and vulnerability. A man who revisited scenes to relive control. The circled Wednesdays were not reminders. They were trophies on paper. Sydney grappled with the possibility that for years, a predator had navigated its nightlife unnoticed. Parents warned their sons as well as their daughters. Bars increased security. CCTV coverage expanded citywide. The Mercer case became a case study in missed signals and technological limitations of the early 2000s. And yet, amid the noise, Liam's family sought something quieter. They visited his grave, newly marked, bringing flowers and photographs. For them, the word solved remained complicated. They knew who killed their son. They knew where he had been hidden. But they did not know why. They did not know if others had suffered the same fate. Years passed. Appeals were filed and denied. Hargreaves aged behind bars, his hair thinning, his posture stooping. He refused participation in rehabilitation programs. He declined interviews. Silence became his final act of control. Then, in 2016, an unexpected development surfaced. A former inmate came forward claiming Hargreaves had confided in him. According to the inmate, Hargreaves spoke of mistakes and unfinished business. He allegedly mentioned a location near the Hawkesbury River where the water keeps secrets better than soil. Authorities launched a targeted search along sections of the riverbank accessible from roads Hargreaves had frequented. Divers descended into murky depths. Cadaver dogs combed marshy edges. Weeks of searching yielded fragments of bone, animal, not human. Rusted debris. Lost fishing gear. Nothing definitive. The tip could not be substantiated. The inmate's credibility was questionable. Still, the phrase lingered in investigators' minds. The water keeps secrets better than soil. It was a taunt, perhaps. Or a confession disguised as poetry. The reopened Aaron Delgado file remains active. Detectives periodically review evidence with fresh eyes. DNA databases expand annually, offering new possibilities. Advances in forensic genealogy have solved cases once thought impossible. Hope flickers in labs lit by fluorescent hum. For now, Daniel Hargreaves serves life for the murder of Liam Mercer. Officially, the 2004 disappearance is closed. Unofficially, it casts a longer shadow than a single conviction can contain. Because those two circled Wednesdays still exist. Ink on paper. Plans interrupted or executed, we do not know. The empty pit beneath the backyard whispers of preparation beyond what was discovered. The clippings in the shed suggest a fascination that predated Liam. Sydney's skyline has transformed since 2004. Glass towers rise where old warehouses stood. The bar in Surrey Hills has changed ownership, renovated its interior, replaced its signage. Trivia nights continue under different lights, different laughter. But sometimes, when the crowd thins and the street quiets after midnight, staff say they catch themselves watching the curb. Watching for a white van that no longer exists. Watching for a figure sitting alone in the corner, observing, waiting. A disappearance solved. A murderer named. A grave unearthed. And yet the possibility of more lingers like humidity before a storm, heavy and unshakable. The city carries on, unaware of which secrets remain buried in concrete, or sunk beneath dark water, or locked behind the unbroken silence of a man who has chosen to take certain answers with him into the grave. The case may be closed in court records, stamped and archived. But in the quiet hours, when headlines fade and traffic noise recedes, the unanswered questions rise again, circling like those inked Wednesdays, demanding to know whether Liam Mercer was the end of the story, or only the part we were able to find.